The avoidant's entire performance of strength, their whole identity as the independent one who doesn't need anyone, their complete facade of being unbothered and detached, all of it depends on one crucial condition. They need to know you're still waiting for them. The avoidant can only maintain their appearance of strength when they have the security of knowing you're available, when they're certain you still care, when they're confident that despite their distance and coldness, you haven't actually moved on. Your continued attachment is what allows them to perform detachment. Your waiting is what enables their not waiting. Your availability is what makes their unavailability possible. The avoidance strength isn't real strength. It's borrowed power that comes entirely from your continued emotional investment in them. And the moment you genuinely stop waiting, the moment you actually move on, the moment your availability is withdrawn, the avoidance strength collapses completely. Without you waiting in the background, they have nothing to be strong against, no contrast to define themselves by, no safety net catching them while they perform their high-wire act of independence. This is why avoidants monitor you obsessively, even while claiming they don't care. They're checking your social media. They're asking mutual friends about you. They're watching to see if you're dating someone new. They're tracking whether you still seem affected by them. This monitoring isn't because they want to reconnect. It's because they need to confirm you're still waiting. As long as you're waiting, they can maintain their identity as the strong one, the one who walked away, the one who's fine alone. But if you stop waiting, if you genuinely move on, their entire sense of self becomes threatened because their strength was always dependent on your weakness, your attachment, your continued hoping they'd come back. The avoidance power over you exists only as long as you give them that power through your waiting. Stop waiting, and they have no power at all. The avoidant is only strong when they know you're still waiting because your waiting means they haven't really lost anything. They can tell themselves they chose to leave, they chose the distance, they're fine with the ending because deep down they know you're still available if they change their mind. Your waiting is their insurance policy. It allows them to explore their independence, to feel powerful in their detachment, to maintain their identity as someone who doesn't need anyone, all while knowing there's someone in the background who still wants them. But when you stop waiting, when you close that door permanently, the avoidant realizes they didn't make a reversible choice. They made a permanent loss. And loss is what reveals their strength as performance. Real strength doesn't collapse when someone stops waiting for you. Real independence doesn't require someone else's attachment to feel secure. Real detachment doesn't get shaken when someone actually detaches from you. The avoidant has none of these qualities. They have only the appearance of strength that depends entirely on conditions they don't control, specifically on you continuing to care about someone who can't care back. The security they derive from your availability. The avoidant derives enormous psychological security from knowing you're still emotionally available to them even when they're not available to you. Your availability allows them to feel wanted without having to be vulnerable. They get the ego boost of knowing someone desires them, someone thinks about them, someone would take them back if they reached out, and they get all of this validation without having to give anything in return, without having to reciprocate, without having to risk themselves at all. Your availability is feeding their sense of importance while requiring nothing from them. They're getting the benefits of being cared about without the responsibilities of caring back. This security is what allows the avoidant to be cold and distant without fear. They can withdraw, they can be inconsistent, they can treat you poorly because they know you're still there. Your continued attachment means their behavior doesn't have real consequences. They can be as avoidant as they want because you're waiting, absorbing the impact of their avoidance, not leaving despite how they treat you. The security of your availability removes all pressure for them to be different. Why would they change? Why would they do the uncomfortable work of being more available when their current strategy is working perfectly? They get to be exactly as defended as they want while still having someone attached to them. Your waiting enables their avoidance. The avoidant also derives security from your availability because it means they're not alone even when they're choosing isolation. They're alone by choice, which feels powerful, not alone by circumstance, which would feel pathetic. The difference is you're waiting. As long as you're waiting, they can frame their aloneness as chosen independence. They're alone because they want to be, because they value their autonomy, because they're strong enough not to need anyone. But if you stop waiting, Their aloneness becomes rejection. They're alone because someone chose not to wait for them anymore. They're isolated because their behavior drove someone away permanently. Their aloneness transforms from chosen independence to consequence of their limitations, and that transformation destroys the security they derived from believing their isolation was power rather than dysfunction. Your availability also provides the avoidant with security about their future. They might not want you right now. They might need space or time or distance. But knowing you're waiting means they have options. If they get lonely, you're there. If they change their mind about wanting connection, you're available. If they do their work and become ready for relationship, you might still be an option. Your waiting keeps possibilities open that the avoidant isn't ready to actualize but doesn't want to foreclose. And this openness is security blanket. They can explore their independence knowing there's someone they could return to, which makes the exploration feel safe rather than risky. Stop waiting, and that security disappears. Suddenly their choices have permanent consequences. Suddenly exploration might mean permanent loss. Suddenly they have to confront that choosing independence might mean accepting aloneness, the power dynamic that depends on your attachment. The avoidant's sense of power in the dynamic is entirely dependent on you being more attached than they are. They feel powerful because they want you less than you want them. They feel in control because they can leave more easily than you can. They feel superior because they're less affected by relationship outcomes than you are. But all of this power is relative. It only exists in comparison to your greater attachment, your greater investment, your greater need. The power dynamic collapses entirely when the attachment levels flip or equalize. If you become less attached, if you want them less than they want you, if you can leave more easily than they can, the entire power structure inverts, and the avoidance strength evaporates. The power the avoidant feels also comes from being the one who controls distance. They're the ones who decide when to be close and when to create space. They determine the pace of intimacy. They set the terms of engagement. And you accommodate whatever terms they set because you're waiting for them, hoping for more from them, willing to accept whatever they offer. Your accommodation is giving them all the power. But when you stop waiting, when you stop accommodating, when you set your own terms that they need to meet or lose you, the power shifts entirely. Suddenly they're not in control of the distance anymore. You are. And the avoidant, who's only strong when they control the dynamic, becomes weak when control is taken from them. The avoidance power also depends on you pursuing them while they remain still or retreat. The pursuit creates a dynamic where they're the valuable one being chased, the prize being sought. This position feels powerful. They're important enough that someone is working to maintain connection with them. They're desirable enough that someone won't give up on them. But this power exists only as long as you're pursuing. When you stop pursuing, when you become still or retreat yourself, the dynamic collapses. They're no longer the one being chased. They're the one who's been left behind. The power inverts, and the avoidant discovers they were never actually powerful. They were just the recipient of someone else's effort, and without that effort, they're nothing special at all. The power dynamic also depends on you caring about the relationship more than they do. The person who cares less has the power. The person who can walk away more easily controls the dynamic. The avoidant has been the person who cares less, and that position has given them all the power. But when you genuinely reach the point where you care less than they do, where you can walk away more easily, where the relationship ending would affect you less than it affects them, the power transfers entirely to you. And the avoidant, who's only been powerful from the position of caring less, has no idea how to operate from the position of being the more attached party. Their strength was always conditional, always dependent on specific power dynamics, never rooted in actual internal stability or security, the identity that requires your contrast. The avoidance identity as the independent one, the strong one, the one who doesn't need anyone, only exists in contrast to your need. They can only be the unbothered one if you're visibly bothered. They can only be the detached one if you're attached. They can only be the one who doesn't need people if someone is demonstrating need. Your waiting, your attachment, your caring is providing the contrast that allows them to define themselves as opposite. Without your contrast, their identity has no meaning. What does it mean to be the one who doesn't need anyone when no one is needing you? What does it mean to be independent when no one is depending on you? What does it mean to be strong when there's no one's weakness to measure yourself against? The avoidance identity also requires you to be the needy one so they can be the not needy one. This binary is how they maintain their sense of superiority. They're above the messy emotional neediness that characterizes your behavior. They're evolved beyond requiring the kind of connection you require. They're stronger because they can function alone while you apparently can't. But this entire identity structure collapses when you stop being needy, when you stop requiring connection with them, when you function perfectly well alone. Suddenly they can't define themselves as not needy because there's no needy to contrast themselves against. And often, once this contrast disappears, what becomes visible is that the avoidant is actually the needier party. They need you to be needy so they can be not needy. Their entire identity is dependent on you playing a role you've stopped playing. The avoidant also needs you waiting to maintain their identity as someone people want. They're desirable. They're valuable. They're the kind of person people wait for. But these identity claims only work if someone is actually waiting. When you stop waiting, when you make clear through your actions that they're not worth waiting for, their identity as desirable becomes questionable. Maybe they're not actually that valuable if someone who cared about them decided they weren't worth the wait. Maybe they're not actually that desirable if losing them didn't devastate you. The avoidance identity as someone special requires someone treating them as special, and your waiting was providing that treatment. Stop waiting, and they're forced to confront that they might be just an average person with above average fear, not the unique independent soul they've convinced themselves they are. The identity crisis that occurs when you stop waiting is comprehensive. The avoidant has to confront that every aspect of their self-concept was relational rather than intrinsic. They're not inherently strong. They were just stronger than you in that specific dynamic. They're not inherently independent. They were just less attached than you in that specific relationship. They're not inherently valuable. They were just valued by you specifically. And without you providing the contrast, the attachment, the valuing, they're just a regular person struggling with unhealed attachment wounds and no particular identity to distinguish them from any other avoidant running from intimacy. The weakness that emerges when you stop waiting. When you genuinely stop waiting, when you actually move on, when your attachment to the avoidant dissolves, their weakness becomes visible in ways it never was while you were attached to them. The avoidant who seems so strong starts crashing out. They're monitoring you obsessively. They're reaching out with increasing desperation. They're showing emotion they never showed while you were together. They're pursuing in ways they never pursued when you were the one pursuing them. All of this behavior reveals that the strength was facade. They were never actually strong. They were just comfortable. And comfort created by your availability felt like strength. But it wasn't. It was just absence of threat, absence of real loss, absence of consequences for their behavior. The weakness also appears in the avoidant's inability to handle your indifference. While you were attached, they could handle everything. They could handle your hurt because it proved you cared. They could handle your anger because it proved you were engaged. They could handle your attempts to fix the relationship because it proved they mattered. But they cannot handle your indifference. Indifference communicates they're irrelevant. And irrelevance is what breaks them, because their strength was always about maintaining importance, even while being unavailable. When your indifference proves they're not important anymore, the avoidant has no response. All their usual strategies fail. They can't create distance because you're already distant. They can't withdraw because you're not pursuing. They can't control the dynamic because you've removed yourself from the dynamic entirely. The avoidant is revealed as weak in the face of genuine detachment from someone they were attached to. The weakness is also visible in how quickly the avoidant's life unravels when you stop waiting. While you were waiting, they had stability. They could be avoidant with you while maintaining appearance of having their life together. But when you stop waiting, when the relationship truly ends, the avoidant often falls apart. They're not okay. They're not thriving in their independence. They're lonely and regretful and struggling. The thriving independence they projected was possible only because you were in the background providing emotional ballast they never acknowledged. You were the stability that allowed them to feel independent. Without you, their independence is revealed as isolation, and isolation isn't strength. It's just loneliness they're pretending is choice. The avoidance weakness when you stop waiting is also evident in their inability to replicate what they had with you. They try to move on to new people, but the new connections don't work. The new people don't understand them the way you did. The new relationships trigger their avoidance just as much or more. They can't find someone who accepts their limitations while also challenging them to grow the way you did. The avoidant realizes you are providing something specific and valuable that they took for granted, and their inability to find it elsewhere reveals they weren't strong enough to appreciate and maintain something good when they had it. Strength would be recognizing value and choosing to keep it. Weakness is destroying something precious and only recognizing its value after it's gone. The panic that replaces the performance. When you stop waiting, when the avoidant realizes you're genuinely done, panic replaces the performance of strength. All the calm detachment evaporates. All the claims of not needing anyone fall away. All the independence they performed so carefully reveals itself as mask-covering terror. The panic is pure. It's the avoidant finally feeling what they've been defending against their entire life: abandonment, rejection, loss of someone who mattered. And the feelings are overwhelming precisely because the avoidant has no practice managing them. They've spent their life ensuring they never get close enough to anyone for loss to hurt this much. But they got close to you despite their defenses, and losing you is activating all the pain they've been avoiding. The panic manifests as the avoidant attempting to restore the status quo where you were waiting and they were strong. They reach out, trying to get your attention. They try to recreate the dynamic where you pursue them. They want to return to the comfortable position where they controlled distance and you accommodated whatever they offered. But you're not playing that role anymore, and the avoidance attempts to restore it fail completely. Each failed attempt increases the panic because the avoidant is realizing they can't control this outcome, can't manage this dynamic, can't restore the situation where they felt powerful. The panic is about recognizing they're powerless, and powerlessness is what they've been defending against through their entire relational strategy. The panic also includes the avoidant recognizing they destroyed something they wanted. While you were waiting, they could maintain the illusion that they were choosing to not be with you, that they were exercising their preference for independence, that they were making empowered decisions about their life. But when you stop waiting, when you make clear the relationship is over and it's over because of their behavior, the avoidant has to face that they didn't choose this outcome. They created it through their limitations, but they didn't want it. They wanted to maintain the option of you while exploring their independence. They wanted to keep you waiting indefinitely while they decided if they could be brave enough for relationship. But you've removed that option, and the removal is forcing them to confront they've lost something they actually wanted, which is causing panic about whether they can get it back and what it means about them if they can't. The avoidance panic when you stop waiting is also about their future. If you're not waiting, if you've moved on, the avoidant has to face the possibility of permanent aloneness. They might repeat this pattern with everyone. They might never find someone as patient as you were. They might end up old and alone because they couldn't overcome their fear. This panic about trajectory, about the life they're creating through their patterns, is what sometimes finally drives avoidance toward therapy. But more often, the panic is managed through defensive narratives that protect the ego. You weren't that great anyway. They're better off alone. Relationships aren't worth it. The avoidant handles panic through rationalization rather than through facing what the panic is teaching them. The respect that only comes after you're gone. The avoidant only respects you when you stop waiting. While you were waiting, while you were accommodating their limitations, while you were accepting whatever they offered, they didn't respect you. They saw you as weak, as too attached, as lacking the boundaries and self-respect that would make you interesting. But when you stop waiting, when you walk away, when you enforce boundaries that say their behavior is unacceptable, respect emerges. Suddenly you're strong. Suddenly you're interesting. Suddenly you're the one who got away. The respect comes after you're gone because respect is what the avoidant feels toward people who don't need them, who won't tolerate their behavior, who choose themselves over the relationship. The respect proves that your waiting was preventing them from seeing your value. The moment you stopped waiting, you became valuable in their eyes. The respect that emerges is often accompanied by the avoidant realizing they want you back. Now that you're not waiting, now that you've demonstrated strength they didn't give you credit for, now that you've shown you can walk away, the avoidant sees you differently. You're not the needy person they could take for granted. You're the strong person who was strong enough to leave them. And strength is attractive to avoidants who are usually only attracted to people they can't have or people who don't need them. Your stopping waiting has made you both. Someone they can't have because you've withdrawn availability, and someone who doesn't need them because you're clearly fine without them. The respect that comes after you're gone is what finally makes the avoidant want to pursue you, but the pursuit comes too late because it's based on you being unavailable rather than on them developing capacity to be available. The respect is also mixed with shock because the avoidant didn't think you had it in you to stop waiting. They underestimated you. They thought your attachment meant you'd always be available, always give them chances, always hope they'd change. They're shocked that you were capable of drawing a line and enforcing it. They're shocked that your patience had limits. They're shocked that you chose yourself over them. This shock is evidence of how little they understood you while you were waiting. They saw you as weak when you were actually strong enough to be patient. They saw you as needy when you were actually secure enough to offer consistent love. They saw you as less than when you were actually operating from health they couldn't recognize because they've never experienced it. The respect comes with recognition of all they missed while they were busy taking you for granted. The respect the avoidant develops after you stop waiting might lead to them reaching out, but respect alone doesn't equal readiness. The avoidant can respect you and still be incapable of meeting your needs. They can recognize you're strong and still be too weak to show up for you properly. They can want you back and still be too scared to do what would be required to keep you if you gave them another chance. Respect is necessary, but not sufficient. It's the baseline. It's what should have been there from the beginning. The fact that it only emerged after you stopped waiting is evidence that the avoidant responds to withdrawal and strength, but not to consistent presence and love. And that responsiveness pattern means they're not ready for healthy relationship, regardless of how much they respect you now that you're gone. The permanent cost of requiring you to stop waiting. The avoidant strength being conditional on your waiting comes at a permanent cost. Even if they do the work, even if they develop capacity for intimacy, even if they become capable of healthy relationship, they can't undo that. You had to stop waiting for them to recognize your value. They can't erase that they respected you only after you left. They can't change that they treated you poorly while you were patient and only wanted you when you stopped being available. This permanent cost is the avoidant losing you at the exact moment they finally understand what you meant to them. The recognition comes too late. The respect arrives after you're gone. The desire to pursue emerges when you're no longer available to be pursued. The timing is always off because the avoidant needs to lose people to value them, which means they're perpetually too late. The permanent cost also includes the avoidant learning the wrong lesson. They learn that being unavailable and walking away creates respect and desire. They don't learn that consistent presence and vulnerability create secure attachment. So even if they become more functional in relationships, they often become functionally avoidant, using distance strategically, withholding to maintain power, leaving before they're left. They learn to use avoidance strategies consciously, rather than healing the wounds that created those strategies unconsciously. The avoidant who finally respects you because you stopped waiting often doesn't use that respect to become more available. They use it to become more strategic about their unavailability. They learn that withholding works, and they become better at withholding, rather than learning that presence is what creates real connection. The permanent cost the avoidant pays is also the accumulation of people who stopped waiting. You're not the first person who got tired of waiting. You won't be the last. The avoidant creates a trail of people who gave up on them, who walked away, who stopped waiting and never came back. And this trail is the avoidant's life, a series of losses that could have been connections, a collection of people who respected them only after leaving, a history of recognizing value too late. The avoidance requirement that people stop waiting to earn their respect means they're constantly losing people who actually cared about them. And the accumulation of these losses eventually leaves the avoidant alone with their strength, which is revealed in isolation as just loneliness they're pretending is choice. The avoidant pays the cost of never experiencing being pursued while they're available. They only get pursued after they've pushed people away. They only become desirable once they've made themselves unattainable. They never get to experience someone wanting them while they're present, someone choosing them while they're vulnerable, someone pursuing them while they're accessible. The avoidant strength that depends on your waiting means they miss the entire experience of being loved while lovable, being wanted while available, being chosen while present. They only experience love in retrospect, pursuit after abandonment, value after loss. And experiencing love only in these conditions means never experiencing real security, never knowing what it feels like to be wanted for who you actually are rather than for being unavailable. The avoidant is only strong when they know you're still waiting, and this conditional strength is evidence they were never actually strong at all. Real strength doesn't require someone else's weakness to exist. Real independence doesn't need someone else's dependence to feel secure. Real detachment isn't threatened by someone else's actual detachment. The avoidant has none of this real strength. They have only performance that depends entirely on you continuing to wait, continuing to care, continuing to be available while they remain unavailable. Stop waiting and the performance collapses. The strength evaporates. The independence reveals itself as isolation they're afraid of. The detachment shows itself as desperate attachment they can't admit to. And the avoidant is left with the consequences of their conditional strength. Alone, without the person they took for granted, finally feeling all the feelings they were supposedly too strong to feel, proving definitively that their strength was always illusion maintained through your waiting rather than anything real inside themselves.